Hey up. Right, I'm not really sure what this video is. I suppose it's just because I hate loose ends. And there's a bit of a loose end that's been bothering me a bit over the last, I don't know, 6 months, maybe a year. I suppose part of it is that, I like to see the best in people, and I don't like doing things that I think might insult other people's intelligence. However, the best laid plans of mice and men don't always work out. Now, on Monday I was test fitting a late prototype of one of MOTONE Custom's latest creations, the BEDLAM /cut silencers, and I thought I might as well take this opportunity to sort this little niggle out in my head. But before I get too engrossed in that subject, can I ask you please, just to help me out, if you enjoy this video, leave a like. And if you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so that you can be informed whenever I upload a new video. Come on, you know it makes sense. Right, let's get on. You might remember, I think probably getting on for a couple of years ago, I reviewed MOTONE Custom's cast alloy big fin exhaust clamps. Now, over the last couple of years, I've fitted several iterations of these, both to the Bobber Black and to the Triumph T120. I've never had a problem with them. However, some people ran into difficulties, and there are several problems at play here that were causing it. Now, running this channel, I'm in a privileged position that I receive information from lots of people through lots of different channels, and I have both this information to draw on and my own experiences with the liquid cooled twins. Now, the first time I unfastened the headers on the T120, I found that the nuts that were holding the headers on were not screwed on very tightly at all. They were not much more than finger tight. I didn't think much of this, I thought it was just a one-off, but then again when I got the Bobber Black, the first time I touched these nuts, I discovered that they were on not much more than finger tight. And I heard this story from a lot of other people as well, which seemed odd because the Haynes manual recommends that these should be tightened up to 19 Newton meters. In each case, I found there were probably far less than 10. So either they were loosening off pretty quickly after you bought the bike, or for some reason Triumph were reluctant to tighten them up to the recommended torque measurements. And it does indeed seem to be the latter, because a lot of people have reported snapping the studs long before they've reached the recommended 19 Newton meters. Also, something that I've noticed on both of my bikes is the fact that the studs have not been fixed in straight. They sort of split off at different angles, almost as though they've been drilled and tapped by hand by somebody who doesn't particularly care, rather than been drilled and tapped by machine, which would ensure that every single one was absolutely straight. But they're not. Now, both of my liquid cooled Bonnevilles are a 2016 and a 2017 model, early days for these particular bikes. It could be that they've sorted that out now. But this problem has become so prolific that MOTONE Customs have now started manufacturing and supplying stainless steel versions of these studs, which are a little bit stronger than the originals and obviously corrosion proof, so that people can quickly and easily replace them with a higher quality item when the need arises. Now, as hopefully you can see here on the left hand port on the Bobber Black, the outside stud bends downwards instead of coming out straight, and the inside stud actually bends out towards the middle of the bike, so it's an absolute nightmare sometimes getting these collars back on. And it doesn't take a genius to work out that when you fasten these up to the specified torque ratings, there's an awful lot of force being put on these studs, which is why they're snapping. And bearing this in mind, because this isn't the first time I've mentioned this in the video, the advice I've always given is not to bother with the torque measurements, but just to use some common sense when fastening the nuts up, as Triumph have had to do, and not to fasten them up too tightly. I mean, Triumph may have sorted this out with the later models, I really don't know. Now, we live in a world that now seems to be ruled by specificity, whereas we managed for decades without torque wrenches. Now, everybody seems to think that they should have a torque wrench, and that everything should be torqued up according to the manufacturer's recommendation. And therein lies another problem. Proper professional grade torque wrenches can cost hundreds of pounds, and you may need several of them to cover the entire torque range on your bike. And they don't last forever. Even with very careful use and care, they need to be recalibrated once a year. Otherwise, the torque values they give you are not accurate, and surprise, surprise, you start snapping fasteners. Or, in the case of the alloy MOTONE big fin collars, they were snapping the collars, so MOTONE had to introduce this spacer to stop them from being damaged if they were over tightened. Now, your average DIY mechanic won't go out and buy a professional grade set of torque wrenches. He'll buy some cheap Chinese rubbish, which to all intents and purposes is about as much use as a chocolate teapot. Many of them are wildly inaccurate out of the box, and having them calibrated would probably cost more than the item cost to buy in the first place. And that is before we even get into the realms of people using torque wrenches that don't really know how to use them. Now, in a response to the last alloy clamp fitting video that I did, which was quite some time ago now, I remember getting an email with a link to a YouTube video. The reason being that in that video I had advised people to stop using torque wrenches on these studs. And someone sent me a link to someone else's video as an example of how to do it correctly, and this is what I should be teaching people. Now, this video wasn't on a channel as such, it was just a chap that was showing you how to fit, funnily enough, these stainless steel MOTONE big fin collars. Now, he complained that it originally had the alloy version and it had snapped while he was fitting it, and it wasn't his fault, it was MOTONE's fault. He said that the alloy ones were poor quality and that it had cracked while he was fitting it, and then gave a very clear example of why it had cracked while he was fitting it, because he didn't know how to use a torque wrench properly. He had what looked like a pretty expensive and very posh workshop grade torque wrench. He carefully wound the nuts onto it evenly on both sides and then used the torque wrench to set the torque settings. He torqued it up on the outside and then he torqued it up on the inside, and then he went back and retorqued both of them again, effectively over tightening them, which is why he'd cracked the original alloy version that he had. I'll explain why. Now, assuming that his torque wrench was within calibration, when he first fastened up that outside nut, he tightened it up to 19 Newton meters. Then when he torqued the inside nut up to 19 Newton meters, the chances are that will have increased the torque on the outside nut. And that's because effectively these two nuts are pivoting on the exhaust seal itself. Now, that's pretty normal in this sort of application. That's all well and good providing that fastener is left alone. But then he went back and torqued them again. Now, in order for a torque wrench to work correctly, it needs to be able to move slightly, i.e. tighten the nut up slightly, in order to activate the click. So by the time he had retorqued both of them, they were probably approaching something like 25 or 30 Newton meters, well over those values specified by Triumph. That's why he cracked his original alloy one. Now, I don't recollect just how old this guy's video is. I would imagine probably getting on for a year old, because he did say that MOTONE didn't argue with him, they just supplied him with a stainless steel version free of charge. And I believe because of these problems with people with faulty torque wrenches or people not knowing how to use a torque wrench, they have now discontinued the alloy version and now just supply the new stainless steel versions. And being stainless steel, these things are so strong there ain't no way you're going to crack them, but I do foresee that some people are going to shear the studs off. Basically through the same sort of behaviour, faulty torque wrenches or not knowing how to use them properly. Now, the new stainless steel version does not come with any of those aluminium spacers. They're not required because the collar itself is more than strong enough. But just like the OEM version, you do still need to leave the gap between the cylinder head and the rear of the collar, otherwise you're going to shear the studs. Now, by all means, if you know what you're doing, you have a good quality torque wrench and you know that it's within adjustment, go ahead and use a torque wrench and tighten it up to 19 Newton meters. That's up to you. But for everyone else, my advice is this. Once you've got the collar on and you've got the thread started, wind it on a couple of turns at a time on alternating sides so that you're winding the collar on evenly. And this applies even if you've taken the OEM collar off and you're replacing it. Keep an eye on the gap on both studs and make sure that as you wind it in, they're approximately equal on both sides. Have something like a decent quality steel ruler handy. They're not expensive these days. And when you reach about 8 or 7 millimeters, you will feel that it will start to give you some resistance. At that point, stop, but make sure that the gap is even on both sides. This is how Triumph appear to have been doing it, certainly on the early water-cooled models, and this will ensure that it's tight enough but you don't cause any damage to your studs. Once you've done that, check the nuts after your first ride. They shouldn't have moved, you shouldn't have a problem, and all will be good. Seriously, the first time I took these off the T120, I think it was to fit the DCAT, the X-pipe, I literally could have removed them just using my fingers. Now I've put the new black contrast cut stainless steel versions on the Bob of Black. I'll leave a link in the video description down below. Also, if I can find it, I'll leave a link for the new stainless steel studs, just in case you need some. Now, I suppose everyone's going to want to know about these rather dashing BEDLAM slash cut pipes that I've been trying out. I think Sam at MOTONE has been developing these for getting on for 2 years, and we did think this was the last prototype, but he just wants to make some very slight tweaks, which personally I don't think are necessary, but he does. But then I guess that's why MOTONE customs are so highly regarded. As you should be able to see, MOTONE have achieved an almost perfect transition from the shroud to these new pipes. It's far better than Triumph managed. Generally speaking, from most manufacturers, these slimmed down pared back drag style pipes tend to be very loud because there's no way to incorporate baffles into them. But that's the main reason that it's taken MOTONE so long to develop these. I don't know how they've done it, but they are pretty quiet pipes. And MOTONE have taken that approach because they are well aware that although a lot of us like loud pipes, there are also a lot of people who don't like loud pipes, but they want something different. I'm not entirely sure what witchcraft MOTONE have employed to achieve this, but there you go. I'm sure all will become clear in the fullness of time. And I will of course be making a video introducing them, demonstrating them and showing you how to fit them when they do become available. Which is yet another good reason for subscribing to this channel. Now don't forget, viewers of this channel do get an exclusive 12% discount from MOTONE Customs via the discount code CACTUS, which will be in the video description down below. Once again, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I am of course going to be back on Friday, so until then, if you're riding, please ride safely, and I'll see you soon.